warm welcome to everyone to the first working group meeting on open science infrastructures. So as you know, this meeting is the first meeting in the context of the implementation of the open science recommendation. So just to introduce myself quickly, my name's Ezra Clark and I'm the Chief of Section of Science, Technology, Innovation Policy in the Natural Sciences sector here in UNESCO. And before we start the meeting, I just make a few practical or housekeeping points, if I may. So please, can you mute your microphone and keep your camera turned off unless you're speaking to preserve the bandwidth. And also, please, if you have any questions or inputs, please feel free to use the chat box at the bottom of the screen. Or when we get to the open sessions, please request the floor by raising your hand, again, using the button at the bottom of your screen. I think you would have just seen a pop-up on the screen a few seconds ago, but just to inform everyone that this meeting is being recorded. And just to inform you as well, the meeting is held only in English. So we have a fairly good participation today. I think we're up to 61 already, and it's still rising slowly. So thanks very much for that. It's good to see the interest. And as you would have seen from the agenda circulated to you before, we'll start with a brief background on open science and the recommendation and where we are. And for those who have participated in one or worse, more of these working groups, this may be a little repetitive for you, so you may wish to put the kettle on quickly while I go through that. After that, we'll move to the objectives of the working group. And after that, we have a short round table with some very interesting participants on the current landscape of the international, regional and thematic open science infrastructures. The next session, the floor will be open for discussion. So with that quick overview of what we have in store for us in these next couple of hours, let me please move ahead and give a quick update and overview of the open science recommendation, where we stand. So in November last year, at the 41st session of the General Conference of UNESCO, 193 member states unanimously adopted the recommendation on open science. Now, as many of you know, this involved, many of you were already involved in this, and as you know, it was developed through a regionally balanced, multi-stakeholder, inclusive and transparent consultation process. And its final adoption was really a historic moment for us and for science, we can say. And just to explain, I mean, a recommendation is a legal instrument which formulated by the General Conference. It's, although not a legal document, it provides principles or norms for the international regulation of the particular question in this terms, open science, and invites member states to take whatever logistic, legislative or other steps in conformity with the respective constitutions to apply these. Next slide, please. For those that don't have or haven't seen a copy of the recommendation in its final form, the approved version, there'll be a link at the end where you can get a copy of this, or please feel free to contact us if there's any problems there. So let me just highlight a few of the main points of the recommendation. So we can say it's the first international normative instrument on open science. It contains the first internationally agreed definition of open science. It spells out the consensus core values and guiding principles of open science, addressing multiple actors and stakeholders. It recommends actions on different levels to operationalize the principles of open science. It proposes innovative approaches to open science at different stages in the scientific process. in the scientific cycle, and calls for the development of a comprehensive open science monitoring framework. Next slide, please. So if we look at the definition of open science, we can say it makes scientific knowledge openly available, accessible, and reusable for everyone. It increases scientific collaborations and sharing of information for the benefits of science and society, and opens the processes of scientific knowledge creation, evaluation, and communication to societal actors beyond the traditional scientific community. Next slide, please. Okay, so we can then move to some of the key areas of action. So built into or enshrined in the recommendation are a number of key areas for action. So member states are encouraged to prioritize these 7 areas in the implementation, in the national implementation of the recommendation. And these are promoting a common understanding of open science and its associated benefits and challenges, developing an enabling policy environment for open science, investing in infrastructures and services which contribute to open science, investing in training, education, digital literacy and capacity building to enable researchers and other stakeholders to participate in open science, to foster a culture of open science and to align incentives for open science, promoting innovative approaches at various stages in the scientific process, and promoting international and multi-stakeholder cooperation in the context of open science, with this review, with the intention to reduce digital, technological, and knowledge gaps. Next slide, please. And now it's also, of course, important when looking at the areas of action for implementation and the opportunities that we also recognise some of the main challenges. And we can summarise those as the following. You can see here on the screen five major challenges. So one is the change in the conventional scientific culture, which is, you know, a kind of change of mindset and practice. Challenges in human and institutional capacity, the existence or not of adequate infrastructures to enable implementation of open science, and that can be manyfold and to be as basic as having a reasonable and decent internet connection. An evolution in incentives for and revision of the current criteria for the evaluation of excellence, of scientific excellence and scientific careers, and addressing the unintended negative consequences of open science practices. So those five main challenges, and you can see the approaches, or we can say initiatives, that can be applied or investigated to address these. And you could see those across the bottom. So we're looking at capacity building policies, finance and infrastructures, finance and incentives, infrastructures and monitoring. And in fact, this is how we've approached the structure of dealing with the implementation in the creation of the working group. So if we go to the next slide, please. You can see the working groups here, and these working groups, as I said, address these things. So in terms of capacity building, policies and strategies, financing and incentives, infrastructures, which we're speaking specifically about today. So just to clarify, we're talking the support for the development of international, regional, and thematic open science platforms for sharing of knowledge and best practices. And a specific focus will be on thematic platforms in UNESCO's priority areas. So biodiversity, water, disaster risk reduction, geosciences, open science and climate change. And the last working group is open science monitoring framework, so to be able to monitor the kind of rolling out of open science. So yeah, just then to go back to the agenda, I explained a little bit in the opening. We'll next move on to the objectives, and without delaying that process further, let me please introduce you to Anna Persic, who many of you will know. She's again in the Science, Technology, Innovation Policy section here in UNESCO. And please, Anna, if I'll hand over to you to take us through the objectives today. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Ezra, for the introduction, and welcome to everybody to the meeting. It's really great to see a lot of the partners that we've been working with while developing the recommendation, but it's also great to see some new names and new initiatives that are also engaged in this working group. And as you know, these working groups are open-ended. And one can join at any stage of the work of the working group. So if there are other colleagues or other partners, other people that you feel should be involved, please do not hesitate to share the information, and we'll be very happy to include them in the work of the working groups. So just a little bit on the objectives of the working group. And to start with that, I just wanted to give you a very short overview of how open science infrastructures are actually reflected in the recommendation. So, of course, the infrastructures, open science infrastructures, are kind of the core element of open science as it is defined in the recommendation. So open science is defined as an ensemble of different elements: open scientific knowledge, open science infrastructures, engagement of societal actors, and dialogue with other knowledge systems. And when we talk about open science infrastructures here, we are talking about both virtual and physical infrastructures. I'm not going to go into the entire definition of infrastructures because you do have it in the recommendation, and I think it's a quite extensive and comprehensive definition. But the idea really is that these are shared research infrastructures needed to support open science and serve the needs of different communities, that they provide essential open and standardized services to manage and provide access, portability, analysis, federation of data, literature, different priorities, and or community engagement. Then there is a little bit of an explanation of what type of infrastructures we are referring to, including some, of course, virtual infrastructure and some major scientific equipment, sets of instruments, collections, journals, publication platforms, repositories, archives, etc., open computational and data manipulation service infrastructures, all that enables collaborative and multidisciplinary data analysis. So, as I said, there actually was a very comprehensive discussion about infrastructure during the process of development of the recommendation, and also during the intergovernmental meeting. So we do have quite a well-established definition of infrastructures in the recommendation. Of course, we are talking in the recommendation of the different repositories that need to be adapted to the specificity of the different objects that they contain, and also the different audiences that they serve. But they all should have some interoperable standards and best practices to ensure the content in these repositories is appropriately vetted, discoverable, reusable by humans and machines. There is also an emphasis on community building efforts, which are seen as crucial for the long-term sustainability of these infrastructures, which should be not for profit and guarantee as much as possible unrestricted access to all public to the largest extent possible. So these are some of the principles that are kind of guiding also the open infrastructures as defined in the recommendation. So not only do we have the definition of infrastructures in the recommendation, we also have a whole section within the areas of action on investment in open science infrastructures and services. And in that field, there is particular mention of the need for investment in science, technology, innovation systems in general, internet connectivity as the prerequisite for open science across the world, the national research and education networks, which are seen in different parts of the world as critical for open science and sharing of knowledge and information. Then investment in non-commercial computing facilities, digital public infrastructure, services that also support the open science approach. And then the need for investment in community managed infrastructures. The fair and care principles that I believe the audience here is very well aware of course, also at the core of the open science infrastructures that are promoted through the recommendation. And so is the need to invest in ICTs that automate searching and analysis of linked publications and data. And also the idea of promoting and investing in those platforms that support the exchange and co-creation of knowledge, as well as community-based monitoring and information systems. So it's quite a large overview of the different types of open science and open research infrastructures, and a relatively large series of recommendations that are given to the member states and other actors through the recommendation. So kind of a lot of work to do in the area of open science infrastructures to implement the recommendation of open science of UNESCO. So against that background of what open science infrastructures are in the recommendation, this working group that will be dealing with open science infrastructures, first we wanted to just explain to you a little bit who the members are. For the moment, as I said, for the first meeting, we had some 100 registered members, and we are here now at 75 participants. So it's quite a good response. Coming from different countries, 35 countries, representing universities, research institutes, international, regional, thematic open science infrastructures, some research funders. We have also with us National Academies of Sciences, Association of Universities, scientific unions, librarians, data organizations, citizen science experts, publishers, permanent delegations to UNESCO, so member states, and other national, regional, international organizations and institutions. So really, the idea with these working groups is that we have perspectives from the different regions of the world, but also from different disciplines and from the different actors of open science, because we really saw that it is very, very important to bring all these actors together when we look at the implementation of the recommendation, to get the entirety of open science there together. For this specific working group, our idea, and this is something that we are also very open to discuss with the group, our idea is to start with some of the first kind of deliverables for the group. One would be to provide a checklist or a guide for open science infrastructures, which are in line with the UNESCO recommendation on open science. As I said, there is already a lot of elements of what open science infrastructures are or are not, and what they have to contain and what are the principles of these infrastructures. But I think it will be important for the different actors to have that unpacked a little bit from the recommendation, and do this relatively simple as possible checklist or a guide for these open science infrastructures. And of course, your inputs will be very important just to make sure that we've captured everything that is in the open science recommendation, and then possibly that we detailed some of these requirements for those who have to either set up new structures or maintain those that are already existing. And another thing that we really are keen on doing, particularly because the member states in UNESCO are asking for it, is to do a platform or an index of the existing open science infrastructures that support the sharing of knowledge and information in UNESCO priority areas. And as Ezra said, that includes biodiversity, water, climate change, disaster risk reduction, geosciences, ocean sciences, and etc. So we would really like to see what is out there, and if we can pull some of these platforms together just to provide to our different audiences and to all the scientists and other actors that work with us in these fields, we thought that would be something that would help with the implementation of the recommendation and also be very useful for the international community that works in these particular areas. In terms of timelines, we would like to gather the inputs for both of these deliverables by September, to have some first drafts by November, and then maybe finalize these outputs by December. Some of you may know in December there is the World Science Forum, which takes place in Cape Town, South Africa, in the beginning of December. And we would like to have a session there, or either like a side session dedicated to open science, looking into the progress of the implementation, where the deliverables of the different working groups would be launched and presented to a bigger audience, before we then also share it with member states, probably in January next year. So I think this is where we are in our thinking of what the working group could do, or how it can assist the Secretariat for in the implementation of the recommendation. But of course, what is also important is to hear from you if there are some other issues that you think we should be considering, and if there is something else that we should really bring to the attention of member states and other actors who will be implementing the recommendation. So we will have this discussion after this session, where we will present some of the existing infrastructures and initiatives. So just keep that in mind, and we'll get back to the working group, to its objectives, and also to how you see your input into this discussion and into these deliverables. So I think if there are no burning questions at this stage, I would maybe give it back to Ezra to moderate a session on this landscape of international, regional, and thematic open science infrastructures. As Ezra said, we have very good speakers who can give us a little bit of an overview of what's happening, and then we can go on with the discussions. If that's okay, I don't see any hands. So I think we can continue like that. Ezra.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna. And yeah, certainly there'll be a session following the next one where there'll be plenty of opportunity for questions and discussion. So I propose we move forward. So okay, so our next session now, we've called a roundtable discussion. And we have, as I said, four very interesting speakers. Since the table isn't round and we don't actually have one, what I'll propose we do is go one by one, and we'll please ask our first panelist. So Fiona Bradley, if you could please turn on your microphone and your camera, please. And then I'll put to you a question, if I may. So please just let us know when you're ready.
I'm ready. Thanks, Ezra.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, I can see you clearly. So, let me just introduce you. So Fiona Bradley is the chair of the advisory group of the Global Sustainability Coalition for Open Science Services, which is a coalition of open science leaders from different regions investing in open access and open science infrastructure with the aims of securing them in the future. So thanks very much, Fiona, for joining us today. And I shall, if I may, put a question, in fact, two questions to you, and then leave you to answer if that's okay. I can repeat, of course, if needed. So can you please tell us about the key criteria that the coalition uses to evaluate open science infrastructures and the type of infrastructures that are funded, as well as the investment approaches that secure long-term sustainability of non-commercial, community-led open science infrastructures and services? So that would be the first part. And then the second part, really, what are the current opportunities and challenges in the development and maintenance of such open science infrastructures that support open science practices?
Thanks very much for,
over to you.
Thanks very much for the questions. Would you like me to go ahead and just run through a couple of slides first, and then I can come back to the questions in more detail?
Please.
Perfect.
Feel free to share your screen. take us through that. Thank you.
Let's see. Okay, is that working? Should be able to see.
Yeah,
slides.
we can
Perfect.
see that clearly. Thank you. Yeah.
Wonderful, thanks very much. So I'll just go through these fairly quickly. So SCOSS, as you heard, is the Global Sustainability Coalition for Open Science Services. So just touching a little bit on some of these challenges in this space at the moment is particularly with regards to how a number of infrastructures began. It has been very much on a project basis. So gaining funds for projects or gaining grants, these are not necessarily suitable for long-term sustainability. And over time, we've seen an evolution in the number and type of infrastructure that have spread out throughout the whole world. And the big challenge there is really for ongoing sustainability for operational funding. And this is absolutely necessary if we want to achieve an equitable and inclusive research culture. So some of the risks in that space are essentially that some infrastructure might be at risk of shutting down or having to withdraw services or switch to a paywall system and no longer be open. So SCOSS's intention is really absolutely to help sustain infrastructure to achieve open science. And it began in 2017 with the purpose of coordinating sharing costs amongst these infrastructure that will help open science to thrive. So there was a survey done around open science infrastructure in Europe not so long ago, and it's very, very stark findings. You can see on this brief chart here, a survey of infrastructure found that quite a number of them would absolutely struggle if they did not have grants to sustain their operations and funding. And some of them would shut down in less than a year or less than 6 months or less than a month if they lost that support. So this is quite a critical issue for many services in Europe and beyond Europe. So some of the risks if we don't take action in this space are that we will potentially lose control over some of this infrastructure that we've been deeply involved in supporting. So many open science infrastructures have been born in our research communities. They're led by our researchers, they're led by institutions, and we don't want to lose control of that. Some of the other risks are that we may have to change the way that we deliver services. We may find ourselves locked into an ever smaller range of commercial players, which is quite challenging. And again, it's really about that connection with researcher-led, research-developed infrastructure and their needs to make sure we can support the best research. Some of the other risks might be we might not be able to comply with policy aspirations if we don't have this infrastructure, and may not be able to shape our future in the way that we want to achieve all of the goals that we want to see in open science. One of the things that is really fascinating in this landscape, and that was touched on in the introduction to this working group, is just how interdependent all of these different open infrastructures are. And that's where interoperability is absolutely critical. So that's open APIs, data sets, ways of connecting between services is absolutely essential, because you can see from this network map just how connected they all are. So just briefly about SCOSS and how it works. So it's community-led, it's community-governed, and it serves to help vet open science infrastructure and recommend them for funding from the community to help support their long-term sustainability. So what we do is assess their requirements, promote that to the community, support transparency and good governance. And it's not a subscription agency. Essentially, it's a way of forming up, a way of trusting infrastructure and then directing the funds right to the infrastructure that need it. It's formed of a very diverse, strong group of members coming from university organisations, departments, government departments, research, library associations and others. And it's very, very diverse governance. So I won't go through all this, but just to mention, there's great diversity amongst the board. The advisory group that I'm the chair of supports the board in making recommendations on infrastructure. And then we also have the SCOS office, which is supported by Spark Europe and Agata Norca. So it's a wonderful group of people and a huge number of other organisations that are supporting this work. So you can find a lot more information about where SCOS has worked on looking at some of the challenges in this landscape, the opportunities, and that has led to a very strong mission and vision that were developed at the end of last year. So some of the key goals are really around promoting sustainability through providing funding and support for infrastructure, raising awareness about the value of non-commercial infrastructure, and building and maintaining trust through vetting and selecting services to support. And so far, it's been very successful with over 300 institutions taking part by pledging their support across 24 countries, and 10 infrastructures have been selected so far. And you can see the list of those infrastructures, their logos at the bottom of this slide. And so far, more than 4.8 million euros has been pledged. And there's more information available at the website and through the newsletters. But specifically around this question of, where we see some of the issues and opportunities and things like that. So we're very focused on open publishing services, fair open access repositories, open research data. And it's there is a very a good rigorous process in assessing some of these infrastructures, looking at what their financial status is, their legal governance, and their relevance across disciplines and international. So there's a very strong emphasis on also highlighting and supporting infrastructure from the regions. And some of the other opportunities are very much in the space of looking at the growth of bibliographic data and opportunities for analysis, and highlighting and how we can make more of in terms of opportunities around openness in code, software, APIs, all of those things to make sure that systems are as interoperable as possible. So that's really my response, and I'm just looking for the button to stop sharing. Here we go. And I'm happy to elaborate on anything further later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fiona, for that. And thanks very much for the offer. So we'll, when we move to the discussion section, I'm sure there'll be some questions or requests for additional information from the other participants. So with that, I think we'll say thank you. Thanks very much for your time. Thank you for the very interesting and enlightening presentation there. Thank you very much. So now we'll move around our non-existent table, and can I please invite Kathleen Shearer to join us, please? Please let me know when you're connected.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you very well. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. I wasn't expecting to go now. I thought it was someone else. So let me just share my screen with you. I have a few slides.
So let me just first say a quick couple of sentences to introduce you to everyone.
Sure.
Kathleen Shearer is the Executive Director of the Confederation of Open Science Repositories, which is an international association that brings together individual repositories and repository networks in order to build capacity, align policies and practices. So I'll ask you the question if I may, and then please share the screen and respond to us. So it's kind of in two parts. So recently you've been working on the COAR community framework for best practices in repositories. So can you please tell us a little bit about the outcomes in terms of criteria of this framework that can be adopted? And secondly, how these different types of repositories are used in different geographical and thematic contexts. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. So I'm just going to provide a bit of context for the framework. As you mentioned, Ezra, CORE is an international association. We're a membership association. We have over about 150 members and partners from 51 countries around the world. And our interest really is to develop this interoperable network of repositories that support open science. Our vision really is this global knowledge commons based on this interoperable network, and that, you know, in particular, supporting that network to expand and start collecting and providing access to a wide range of valuable research outputs. So there are at least 6,000 open science repositories around the world, probably quite a few more than that, because a lot of them are not represented in the Open Door directory. So I think that's our challenge really, is trying to bring this global community together around these interoperability, best practices and interoperability requirements. Just fundamentally, I want to go through some of our principles, which I think are very important and very much aligned with the UNESCO recommendation on open science. So what we really want to support is a very distributed network, not a centralized, you know, a high degree of centralization of services. And that's really important because we want to be able to support the needs of different communities. So different domain communities, as well as different regions and different countries, different languages. So this fundamental principle of distribution of the system supports the idea of bibliodiversity and how important bibliodiversity is in the health of our scholarly communication and our scientific ecosystem. As Fiona mentioned, and Anna did as well, interoperability is key. So what we're looking at is how can we develop a certain degree of interoperability of these services, of these repositories with each other. So, so as we know, research is global. So what we really want to do is connect the content in repositories across the world through a certain level of interoperability that allows the development of value-added services that might be domain services, for example, or discovery services on top of the global network. Key, though, is to avoid integration, because if we start to integrate infrastructures too closely, it doesn't allow us to innovate. So we're trying to get the right balance around interoperability, but not integration of different functionalities. And many of you know we have launched a project called the Notify project, which is looking at how to connect various infrastructures using linked data notifications, but that's a talk for another day. Of course, open is a fundamental concept. We strongly support open access to the content in repositories. It's critical to be able to provide researchers around the world with access to content without having to pay for it. And both inclusive and trusted are important concepts. And so again, it's trying to create this balance of bringing the community towards adopting good practices, but keeping the bar at a certain level so that that we can include as many repositories as possible. So we're trying to ensure that repositories adopt good practices so that they can be trusted by the research community, but bringing along as many from our community as possible. And that's really what brings us to our good practices framework at CORE. And I've stolen a slide here from our Japanese colleagues who've been very active in the development of this framework, along with others from other countries. And the idea behind this framework is that we needed some level of standardization across the community. There are repositories that are collecting data, that are collecting articles, that are collecting now code, and so on. We want those repositories to have some level of interoperability. Yet there are, shall we say, good practices, other types of frameworks that are very discipline, domain specific or content type specific. So essentially what we did was bring together the various frameworks that exist out there already. And we looked at what are the commonalities around those different frameworks to develop the core community framework for good practices. And I think the key issue here is that not only did the criteria come from different domain and content type communities, but it was vetted by our international community, because again, we want to be inclusive. We want to ensure that repositories in the developed world, but also the developing world, can participate in this international ecosystem for science and research communications. So the first version of this framework was published in October 2020. It has been translated into, I think, 11 languages. And you can see there on the side some of the languages. And we have a new version that will be coming out in about 2 or 3 weeks. And again, critical to this is that it's something that we've been working with the whole community on. We have an open consultation on the criteria, and we have a working group that goes through the input that we received from the community consultation to develop this framework. It has essential and desired characteristics in 8 areas. So discovery, access, reuse, integrity and authenticity, quality assurance, preservation, sustainability and good governance, and other with the J in it. I think the other issue that's really important is we know that we can publish a good practices framework, but there's a lot of work to be done to help our community improve the implementation of their repositories and their current practices. So we have launched also a strategy, what we're calling to modernize the global repository network. And this is really working with our partners in different countries and different regions to develop strategies so that we can help to support repositories around the world in adopting these good practices and modernizing repositories. And so with that, I'll say thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to your comments and questions in the discussion period.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks very much, Kathleen. Again, very interesting, and we'll hold off for the moment on questions until we reach the next session. So thank you very much for that. Again, very interesting and useful presentation. So now, if I may, we'll move around the table. So can we please invite Caitlin Thaney, please, to join us? Please let us know when you're—
Sure thing. Let me just get my
microphone on. We can see you clearly. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you. So again, let me just introduce you very quickly. So Caitlin Thaney is the Executive Director of Invest in Open Infrastructure, which is an initiative aiming to improve funding and resourcing of open science infrastructure. So yeah, in a similar way, I can see you have shared the screen. So I guess we have some slides coming. So before that, let me just ask you a kind of two-parted question, if I may, and hopefully you'll respond to with your slides or presentation. So can you please tell us what are the main improvements that are needed in the current landscape of international open science infrastructures, and how the Invest in Open Infrastructure is helping funders and other key stakeholders to increase their efficiency in their investment? So over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ezra. And also thank you to the previous speakers and to the organizers as well. It's been wonderful to hear about all the efforts in the space and also to have you all join us. Ezra, to your questions, I'm going to go through a little bit of, for those that might be new to invest in open infrastructure, about how we, quickly about how we came about and how we work alongside the organizations that you've heard of previously, especially SCOS and CORE, and also give a little bit of a sneak peek as to the work that we're doing right now that address some of your questions around some of these main improvements that we view are needed to help fund and increase investment and adoption of open infrastructure, and also how we're looking at positioning ourselves and serving as a player in the space. So on a high level, Invest in Open Infrastructure came about. I joined in March of 2020. The project itself actually began as a coalition, and I know I see Vanessa Prudman here on the call, was one of our inaugural members, starting in 2018 as a conversation about how we can better sustain the broader open infrastructure and open science space, and also really bred out of some of the frustration of the funding models not necessarily leading to the adoption and the efficacy and the sustainability of the broader ecosystem that I think many of us had envisioned when we had started talking about open access a number of years ago. Invest in Open Infrastructure, we are a nonprofit initiative. We're fiscally sponsored by a group called Code for Science and Society. And we're dedicated to helping to increase the investment and also adoption of open infrastructure, really to further equitable access and participation go ahead.
Sorry, Caitlin, yes. Just one little question. I'm sorry. Sure. We're not sure if we're seeing your slides.
Oh, no, is it not showing?
Notes,
let me try again.
But not your.
Let me try again.
Yeah.
No worries. Let me do it again.
Good.
Great. Thank you for stopping me there. Here we go. Dun, dun. I'll try to share again. Oh, you saw my notes on that side. Oops. There we go.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, that's better. If we can
my
just
apologies there.
Screen, then that would be great.
There you go. Is that better, Anna?
Yeah, much better.
Okay.
Thanks.
So really focusing on, apologies for that, in terms of increasing the investment and the adoption of open infrastructure, again, very much aligned with the previous speakers here as well. Our approach differs slightly in terms of the fact that we really are invested in employing a research-driven approach and have a dedicated research team to help guide the strategies and actions that we are looking to help, again, achieve these broader aims of sustaining and increasing investment and adoption. We also work to design resources and also targeted analysis. And this is something that we, over the last 6 months, have been building out our research capacity to start delivering on in a more robust fashion to help funders and also budget holders, whether they're institutions and governments, consortia, et cetera, to help assess, evaluate, and also make investment decisions about open infrastructure. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then lastly, we really want this research to be, help to put that into action and thinking about what that looks like. And so we work to help identify areas where we can experiment, where we can pilot new solutions, and also how we can help coordinate other stakeholders, coordinate with other stakeholders in the space. We know that we are by no means, as you've heard from the previous presentations, the only group working to help advance this mission. And so thinking about what it looks like to increase the sustainability of the sector by furthering a shared roadmap and aligning those areas and identifying where we can be most effective alongside our peers. A little bit more about what this looks like in practice. So we're talking about the research and analysis side of things. We're inspired by organizations like Open Philanthropy, GiveWell, other groups in the space that are both radically transparent, but also very much looking to build out an evidence base to help guide our work. Coming into this work, having been in the space for over 15 years, there still are a number of unanswered questions about how much money is being invested in the sector, what are the sort of projects that we should be funding, how are we defining that, areas that are really important when we talk about, talking about furthering this investment. And so we have what we refer to as sort of a push and pull mechanism. in terms of how we work to not only help inform and advocate on behalf of the broader ecosystem and open infrastructure providers, and also our peers that are looking to sustain the space, be they funders, policymakers, et cetera, but looking at ways in which we can, through participatory mechanisms, increase the visibility of open infrastructure services and the catalog of open infrastructure services I'll share a little bit more about, and inviting projects to participate in that process and really engaging with them to better understand their funding needs and, helping to move that process forward. We also augment that, and this is something that we're going to be ramping up over the next few months, augmenting that with focused research into specific causes or areas of interest or gaps in our understanding. For example, in terms of communication and access to information challenges in areas of the world that we may have less insight into, areas where we know there might be specific risks for infrastructure that we might be able to see through our analysis is increasingly becoming commoditized. Things along those lines where we can start to do more targeted research on opportunities, risks, who the players are, and start having those conversations in a more focused means. We also work on designing these resources and sort of targeted support and strategic guidance to help further a healthier, more diverse and robust ecosystem. And so what this looks like is we've been doing extensive research over the past year on underlying costs, as well as externalities. So in addition to working with projects to understand, their budgets, their needs, their funding history, what their challenges are, aspirations, also looking at not only externalities in terms of shifting space in terms of mergers and acquisitions, competition in broader space or decrease in competition due to some of the monopoly control, privacy and security reasons, things that we want to be proactive about and better understand and engage with experts on. But also working with others across the digital public infrastructure space, even those outside of higher education and research, to really understand and stay on top of some of the ways in which folks are looking at identifying and assessing the criticality of open infrastructure, how to prioritize investment, how they're addressing some of the similar systemic challenges that we're looking at, as well as on our end, operating in some ways as if you were to think of looking at your stock portfolio and the things that you'd want to know about assessing financial health of an investment, risk, opportunities, et cetera, so that we can provide that information so people can make more informed decisions and then work with others to help do that. And then lastly, what I think kind of sets us apart is that we're really invested in looking at different funding mechanisms that can address the complexity and also some of the critical needs here. And so we're embarking on a series of feasibility studies that will engage with financial experts to explore ways in which we can use targeted funding mechanisms at a number of different levels to diversify and deepen support in the broader space, as well as deepen engagement and looking at a mixed methods approach there as well. Some of the points of friction that were surfaced in some of our early work around the Future Open Scholarship Project, which was from 2020 to early 2021, which had representation from 18 countries around the world and about 125 participants. We heard from institutional leaders as well as open infrastructure providers that, especially when it came to making decisions about investment in open infrastructure, that time, prioritization, assessment challenges came into play, whose values apply. Also the need for local first development, as it was coined to us, in terms of resources at an institutional level, when also looking at supporting a project that has either global reach or is coming from a broader community base outside of that institution, about how needs are prioritized and how that can affect the sustainability of the work. Staffing and labor concerns to help not only develop and maintain, but also sustain these services. Favoring of usual suspects, the challenge of money begets money, and also needing better information as to what is available, what is out there, what might not necessarily be in our purview because of just the zones of influence that we all operate within. Resourcing trade-offs and also influence. Where are there opportunities to further look at different means of thinking about investment in the sector? And then also funding models that is, as we've heard previously and in Fiona's presentation, that can often lead to burnout or resource drain, rather than thinking about the broader sustainability and ability for projects to grow, scale, and meet their community needs. And so when we were building out the catalog of open infrastructure services, which we were working on the last few months of 2021, and we went live with in 2022, our main aim was to start to pilot a means of addressing some of the information asymmetries that we heard of from institutional leaders as well as funders in terms of, how can we provide an opportunity to look at these projects alongside one another, as well as having some different means of marrying financial information, organizational information, technical information, with also some of the values and principles-based frameworks that I know many on the call today have been, not only involved in the development of, but also moving forward. And also foster a greater understanding of some of the infrastructure services. We wanted to cultivate a deeper awareness of how these services are provided and what sort of ecosystem they exist in, and prototype a means of standardizing how that information is shared publicly. We also wanted to work with institutional budget owners and funders to understand their needs. We did an initial round of focus groups with those groups to understand better about what their decision-making process looks like. This summer, we will be embarking on another round of testing to further iterate on that prototype and further build out that work. To give you a sense, and I'll provide the links here, and I know some of my colleagues are on the call too, who can also drop some of these links into the chat. We started by looking at 10 projects and working really deeply with those projects over the course of a series of months to not only conduct interviews, but also do an audit of their information to look at not only elements around transformative influence, and this is just a snapshot of some of the things that are included in thinking of transformative influence of, does it shift us away from the models that we know are not working, right? And what are some of the areas that we want to call out, at least for the first prototype, in terms of accessibility, in terms of governance, in terms of commitments to equity and inclusion and openness. The 10 projects I will mention, we chose those as we were building out our research capacity. And so there's a diversity of projects there so that we could help build out our understanding of different information sources and engage with a variety of projects. We have since opened up a call for interest in terms of allowing projects to express that they would like to be included in COIS, or the Catalog of Open Infrastructure Services, we refer to as COIS. And so we're going to be continuing to develop that. But just to give you an idea as to some of the information on the back end. So in terms of data collection, in addition to a broader list that is pulled from a number of different resources that have been mentioned today, but also from others in the space that we very much work alongside with and learn from, open resources to help index open infrastructure projects. I think our list is over 1,000 projects that we have access to that we're working to kind of filter through. But also on the data collection side, looking to bring in information from service provider and funder websites, annual reports. If you're registered as a nonprofit in the United States, information from Form 990 data, surveys and interviews with service providers, as well as evidence from documented practices. And so really having an engagement with service providers, but working to pull also public information and best practices from the nonprofit assessment ecosystem and scholarly literature. We have more information about how our information that's presented was, sorry for the motorcycle, how the information that's presented was drawn from where it was found too. And some of the key questions we have is, what information do decision makers need to drive investment? What's missing? We really started with this initial prototype to make everything there as sort of evidence-based as possible. What we're looking to build towards are areas where we can bridge and bring our analysis and recommendations, as well as additional areas that we know we would like to look for in terms of technical dependencies, in terms of broader financial health. We also want to kind of pose to the group, and we'll be doing some focus groups around this, what trends and observations do we notice as we look at this information alongside, as we further build this out, and has this information been reported before? Also, just to give a sneak peek, this is what we're building towards. This example here on the right is from the World Health Organization's Global Observatory on Health Research and Development. And there's a link there too. We had started back in 2020, and we've continued to work on and are doing some data modeling work right now in terms of looking at funding trends and bringing information from top philanthropies. We currently have information from 18 top philanthropies as to date, and are looking to bring in additional data as well as automation and work with others in the space to bring this to a kind of more robust place where we can do this analysis more readily. But thinking about where is investment currently flowing? And from that information, can we start to identify where there might be gaps in infrastructure needs specifically that we should be working towards helping to address or advocating for? Where are there concentrations in support? And what does that tell us? And also, again, what sort of trends and observations do we notice? What can we learn from that information? In addition to how much investment is currently flowing to some of these projects, which I know is a bit of an open, ambiguous question. And then lastly, in terms of the funding model exploration, what we're going to be ramping up work over the summer for is to think about, are there like what sort of specific funding mechanisms, and we have some ideas in mind that we're working with some financial experts to model, but ways in which through some of these traditional mechanisms, such as outcomes-based financing or program-related investments, participatory budgeting, et cetera, that we can help set value-aligned conditions for ongoing investment to say, what would it look like for there to be funding that would, ensure that a project stayed in the community ownership space without it being commoditized, or had specific mechanisms that would allow for there to be a consultation should there be a commercial offer that's made to buy that service. That's especially interesting for the at-risk infrastructure that we've seen over the last while be bought up by some of the big commercial players. Exploring investment that provides additional flexibility, as well as defies the traditional timelines for investment beyond this 3 to 5 year usual funding cycle, and really moving us beyond this idea of needing returns on investment when that might not necessarily suit the type of infrastructure we're looking at. And we're inspired by models in terms of water and sanitation and other utilities about what would it look like to, not be thinking about these shorter term funding cycles and more about sustaining this in a longer term way. What sort of models have been employed in those arenas? As well as catalyzing and incentivizing investment from a broader, more diverse set of players beyond the traditional philanthropies and government, who should have a role in helping to sustain the space, who's deriving benefit from the space. And also, how can we augment and build on the work of others that are working to advance the shared aims? I don't think I need to spend very much time on this. Another big question is ensuring that when we talk about value of shared infrastructure, that we're really being clear about who we are thinking about in that space. And this is a work that we are undertaking at IOI specifically in terms of helping to combat some of the systemic inequities of who's present in these conversations, who's represented in this infrastructure, whose needs are prioritized, and making sure that we're continuing to challenge ourselves in that. And so also to think about for the funding about what we're looking to enable versus some of the specific areas of dedicated projects, noting that a number of the costs that have surfaced in our analysis around hidden costs of infrastructure fall between the lines. And so thinking not only about the issues of interoperability and frictionless exchange of data and content and software, but also thinking about what it looks like to have affordable and accessible tools, both technically accessible as well as immediately accessible, and able to be implemented at an institutional level around the world. Commitments to freely and openly sharing research outputs, investments in things that are community owned and led, and support to also explore what that model looks like in terms of governance and funding for that. And then also making sure that when we're talking about increased embeddedness, that we're understanding what other costs are associated, whether it's migration costs, implementation costs, support for local organizations for implementation and capacity and governance. We can't solve problems with the same thinking that we used to create them. And just my last note, because I see Ezra popping on with this video here, we really want to just underscore that for open infrastructure and open research to be possible, we need the infrastructure to be similarly designed. And that means shifting our reliance from bigger commercial players to those that are more aligned with those values. I will share out these resources as well. You can find more information on our website, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Caitlin. And I hope me appearing wasn't too an obvious signal that we were approaching time. So no, thank you. Thanks very much for another excellent presentation. You've given us a lot of information there, a huge amount of information to chew on and mull over. So thanks very much for that. We'll certainly need the presentation to look in more detail and of course, continue to coordinate with you and with all the other speakers too. So thank you. That's excellent. Thanks so much. And again, I will not take questions now, but they'll come in the next session. So let me just say thank you very much once again to Caitlin for the presentation. Thank you. Thanks. So now we move to our last speaker on this roundtable. And can I please invite Thomas Makudu, please, to join us? And please let me know when you're connected.
Yes, I'm here.
You're here. Excellent. Okay, I can hear you clearly, see you clearly. Thank you. Thanks very much. So Thomas Makudu is the Executive Director of the African Open Science Hardware. And types to share or just respond to the questions? Okay, excellent. Okay, so Thomas, please, can I ask you what infrastructures are needed to facilitate development of and access to such tools and hardware, especially in regions or research institutions with limited resources? And then based on your experience at Africa Open Science Hardware, what do you think are the opportunities and challenges in this area and specifically in Africa? Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your question. I will try to give a quick overview for the context. I will say that we have a traditional challenge in area like Africa or Global South, globally speaking. Traditional challenges are just lack of electricity and connectivity, but I will not want to expand on this because that is what we already know. But in terms of, in order to support the growing or the implementation of open science recommendation in our area, I think the most important for the moment are sustainable digital infrastructure, because through digital infrastructure we can fill a big gap, and this can allow people also to connect widely abroad and across the world. Facilitate connection, facilitate the sharing of knowledge. So digital infrastructure in our context is very, very important. And what I would like to say also is infrastructure and capacity building are tightly related, because in our context, sometimes even when people have access to this digital infrastructure, sometimes they lack some skills, they lack some literacy about open science, how to use or how to implement, or how to work with such digital infrastructure. So it's really important also to support the stakeholders. I would say institution, I would say pupil, researcher, or innovator, to teach them how they can use this infrastructure and how they can build this infrastructure themselves, because they need to create, to design or to contextualize their infrastructure in such a way that they can meet our needs. Is very important to contextualize, because our reality is so different from Western countries to Africa, Latin America, can also say, or Central Asia. And we can have a common understanding. We can have a common infrastructure, but sometimes some of this infrastructure need to be contextualized, and this take a critical mass of actors who are aware of the evolution of technology and so on. So just to recap on the first question, I will say that we need digital infrastructure which are contextualized and decentralized also. So that is the reply that I can give to the first question. For the second question, with my experience of Africa OSH or Africa Open Science and Hardware, we say that this is a big opportunity for Africa, because when we are talking about equipment, what we are talking about infrastructure, we can also see equipment as physical or virtual, as Anna said at the beginning. But the chance we have with Open Science Hardware is that we are working with in both sides of this kind of these two form of infrastructure, because what we are doing is just we are using information available on the web and trying to reify this information in concrete object, in concrete equipment, and the inverse is also possible. So it's mostly about materialization and dematerialization of information, and that is why you can see that from a code or a design available on a platform like GitHub or Zenodo, if I want, we can create a concrete object using equipment like laser cutter, 3D printer, and so on. And this is very important for the distributed manufacturing in such a way that people in our context, like Africa, in our context, can easily create their own equipment to fill the gap between theory and practice. And the advantage is that through this field of open science hardware, we are doing a lot of things which are aligned with the priority area of UNESCO, I think. And what I will suggest for this working group is to see how we can go through the main platform of GOSH, Gathering Open Science Hardware, to see which initiative or which platform fit with this priority. So it's a small work of benchmarking analysis, but it's very easy to do. And we can, because the result on this form of knowledge is not really visible in the traditional way people want to read research, like a scientific paper, because innovator and people working in open science we deal a lot with code, and they are working or they are sharing their design on platform like GitHub or GitLab. So that is something that we need to explore in order to build a concrete index. But the challenge in this field for us in the African context is, of course, is funding to support this, to support people working on the ground. Is also political, because the decision maker need to be insensitized on the potential of open science hardware. And this is something that, because once they are insensitized, they can better support innovator locally. They can better help us, help them improve their work on their contribution through a platform. So I will stop there. If you have more questions, I'll be happy to reply. What I will do right now is I will pass the website of Africa OSH in the chat so that you can go there and meet what we are doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Thomas, yeah, for the very interesting response to those questions and for the information you gave, but also your kind of insights and perspectives and even some suggestions for the working group. So very much appreciated. So before we move to the open discussion section, we can just give the chance to the participants if they have any questions, any specific questions. For this, the easiest, please, is if you go to the bottom of your screen and under the button that says reactions with a smiley face on, from there you can raise your hand. So if you could do that way, please. If we have any specific questions, I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. So I'll give people a couple of seconds to raise their hand. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next session where you are also free, of course, to discuss there. But if there's any specific questions to any of our 4 excellent presenters, I'll just give you a second now. Or if not, maybe colleagues who are monitoring the chat, if you have anything, maybe you could jump in and read out if there's any specific questions that have been coming up on the chat I haven't seen.
We haven't seen any questions in the chat, but I think what would be interesting to hear maybe from Caitlin or Kathleen or Fiona is precisely what Thomas was saying. You know, there is a difference between developed and developing countries. How is this being taken into account into what their initiatives are? Because I mean, what we were saying all along during the process of the development of the recommendation is that for open science to really work, it has to work everywhere, and there has to be the same criteria in different parts of the world. And we are talking about decentralization of information in a way, distribution, etc. But again, there needs to be some kind of equity in accessibility, etc. So maybe just if they could touch upon their reflections on how to go beyond developed countries and move to the south as well.
Okay, thank you. I see Caitlin and Fiona have turned their cameras on. I'll take that as a signal that they wish to respond. So can we start with Fiona, please? You have the floor.
Thank you very much. So it's absolutely central to everything that SCOS is doing, and I'm sure it is absolutely key to everything that we're all aiming to achieve, is that equitable playing field where we recognise that there are different ways of knowing, different ways of doing research, that there's biodiversity, and we understand that we need to communicate in different languages using different infrastructures. So for that reason, SCOS has supported a number of different infrastructures over the different expression of interest rounds that there have been over the last couple of years. And there is a very special emphasis on attracting applications from infrastructure that are based outside of Europe and North America. So definitely we have seen a lot of very interesting infrastructure, particularly Latin America and in Africa. And also what is, I would say, I think really exciting for the future of open science is where we see collaboration between regions, not just, you know, north-south, but south-south collaboration as well. So in that respect, I guess some of the challenges that are in this space are, of course, surfacing infrastructures that are working in languages other than English, that may not have a huge user base outside of their region, even if they're very well supported in their own region, and things of that nature. And then also, I'm based in Australia, so countries that have a very large First Nations populations, there's also that other dimension as well of understanding the care principles and how we look at infrastructures that also deal with those different kinds of knowledges. So, I mean, this is something I think SCOS is very enthusiastic about, very keen to continue working in this space and partner with more organisations and more infrastructures. But yes, it definitely has its challenges too. So there's a lot more work to be done.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Caitlin next, and then Kathleen as well. So Caitlin next, please. Thank you.
Yeah, building on what Fiona had said, the ways in which we've kind of been challenging our assumptions in this space are not only in terms of our own governance, and so recognizing and needing to have those perspectives more incorporated in our day-to-day work. And I know Thomas, you helped inform our governance work for IOI and helping us evolve that, but also bringing those perspectives to IOI's leadership positions and things. When it comes to our steering committee, we've got 3 of our steering committee members who are actively involved on the African continent in various elements of digital public infrastructure as well as research infrastructure. And so that we can help learn from that, but also targeting our engagement and understanding where there might be communication or access or dynamics that we are just not as aware of, and catering to Western needs. And so I'll give you a really specific example of that. One of our conversations around infrastructure needs came up around, and I'm glad to see that connectivity and bandwidth came up when it comes to accessibility, but thinking of not only the translation and the accessibility there for others to be able to participate, but having also an understanding of what sorts of technologies are prevalent and also helping to enable participation given mobile bandwidth, right? We had colleagues that were in Western Africa that said, HTML5 actually is a better fit for what we're looking at. And a number of open access solutions don't necessarily allow for that, which prohibits them from participating in various ways. And so this is where, as we're building out our funding framework, really understanding some of the elements and the nuance in making those assessments, not only in terms of when we talk about accessibility, moving beyond web accessibility to thinking about what it means to help participate, but also in COIS, we're looking at the project Makudu, which focuses on Indigenous communities, and recognizing that in infrastructure, if we're talking about reliance for a specific community, that community might be a smaller subset of a population, but it'd be incredibly needed. And so ensuring that that's factoring into our analysis as well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, Caitlin. Kathleen, please.
Yeah, thanks. And I think, Anna, your question is so important because, there's no real easy answer to this, because obviously the places that are well-funded, places that are wealthier can fund their infrastructure. So I think we'll never get to a place where the infrastructure is going to be equivalent across developed or wealthier countries and developing countries. So, and the other issue really is that most of this infrastructure, as Caitlin was saying, even if it's open infrastructure, it's available to any institution or group that wants to use it, it was developed in the global north. And so what I think is really interesting is pursuing or supporting initiatives where the infrastructure is actually developed in developing countries. So one example is La Referencia, which has developed this harvesting software. And so we have those in Europe. There's Open Air, which is a very big, well-funded project. But the Latin Americans develop their own because they have, much fewer resources, and it works perfectly well in Latin America. And now it's being adopted in the African context. So I think keeping our eye on those types of developments, trying to, as much as we can, support the development of infrastructures in those countries that will allow the people who are using that infrastructure to be the ones that define what the functionality is and whether it works in their own local context. So I guess that's what I'd like to add to the conversation.
And thank you. Thanks very much for three interesting, clear answers. So just before finishing, I'll just offer Thomas the chance if he wants to come back for a comment on some of the things that really responded to his initial question. No obligation, Thomas, but just if you wanted to come back.
Okay, I want to thank Anna for raising this point. It's essential, in fact, and that is why I said during my presentation that it's very important to put together capacity building and infrastructure, and specifically in our context, because when people are well trained to build something or to create new infrastructure like that, you can see how some initiatives will come from our context, and this is really important. But also, I think there is a good a big work to do from the Western context, because the question I used to ask is which amount of context coming from Africa, really from Africa, do you have access in your context? So the ratio is very small, I think, and but we can do some. I forget the word in English. Some the pont, in French is pont. We can do some bridge. Yes, we can do some bridge in order to allow a pipeline in such a way that in university and so on, you have a certain amount of knowledge coming from African context. But this need people based in Africa aware of how this infrastructure works and how they can ensure the visibility of their knowledge. And there's also a big issue around data trust, you know, the notion of data trust, because some people are afraid of open access, put their knowledge available. They are afraid it's still very present in our context. And I think it's something we need to work also on in order to ensure this visibility and equity. The responsibility is not only yours, it's also ours, you know. So that is what I can say.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Thank you very much, Thomas. So with that, that brings us to the end of this session. So I'll say thank you very much to our four speakers, to Fiona, Caitlin, Catherine, and Thomas. Really appreciate your time and all the enormous amount of information you've provided and insights and so on you've given us. So with that, I'll hand over to Anna, please, for the next session, and that's for the discussion. Thank you once again. Anna, over to you.
Great, thank you very much. But I think we've somehow already started the broader
we have it's good.
The broader discussion on you know, basically the deliverables of this working group, what it should be doing and how. And again, I really appreciated the inputs from the different speakers, because it gave us, at least me, an idea that yes, there is criteria for open science infrastructures, but there is also criteria for funding, and there is also then capacity building and awareness raising of the impact and potential for use of these open science infrastructures and open infrastructures in general. So I think, again, we need to think in a more comprehensive way. And I'm just thinking about our member states who are asking us, how do we implement the recommendation, that we have to bring to them this more comprehensive packages for the different parts of the recommendation. But I would be very happy to hear from you about that as well. I will maybe just very quickly share my screen, because we had prepared some questions for you, and maybe we can have a little discussion around those questions, or anything else that you would like to mention at this stage. So the questions were really about some of these main platforms that exist, particularly also for the UNESCO priority areas. I've seen some colleagues involved in, and from GBIF, involved in biodiversity data sharing, others who also are very knowledgeable about some platforms with regards to water related data. It would be great to hear a little bit from your side what these different infrastructures and platforms are, and connected to one of the questions that we got in the chat. How do these platforms then contribute to the implementation of the recommendation, and can we have common principles even though we are talking about different disciplines, and or how to reflect the different disciplines' needs in some common principles? What are the gaps in infrastructures, open science, open access, open science infrastructures? Some of the barriers to the interoperability, as well as collaborative multilingual infrastructures. This idea of multilingualism is a constant question that we receive, and different actors asking how to promote multilingual infrastructures, also visibility of infrastructures and of data sharing platforms in languages different from English. And I was happy also to see some of our colleagues from Latin America, so great if we could hear from them as well. Challenges, opportunities for cross-border multi-stakeholder collaboration on development and use of shared open science infrastructure. So how can we actually build those infrastructures together at a certain point? And then, of course, approaches for funding, maintaining of open science infrastructures, and what are some of the key actors? So we were talking about philanthropists, but what about other research institution, private sector, of course, governments, etc. And then if there is any other question that you think might be useful for this conversation and for this working group, it would be great to hear from you. So I will basically now open the floor. As I said, we have some colleagues here who are working on platforms from different disciplines, and also others who were involved in the development of the recommendation. So it would be really great to get some of your feedback at this stage. Yes, please, John, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Anna. Hi, everyone. So it's been a great session. Early on in the opening presentation, the mention was made of major scientific equipment infrastructures. And so it seemed to me that throughout we've had really quite a big emphasis on knowledge and open science knowledge sharing. And so data and publications, and that's clearly very important. But I thought we might also organize a portion of the discussion around a sort of pipeline of open science. So the start is, of course, the funding agency and the proposal by a scientist or a group of scientists. And perhaps within important themes like climate change and so on, perhaps the peer review and the scientists participating in the proposal at the beginning could actually engage in being open. And then, of course, once it's agreed to go ahead, then you have the measurements by the scientists. It creates the data, obviously. And so something like the African synchrotron, which is under very active discussion, is a major equipment infrastructure development. Latin America, of course, has excellent facilities in Brazil with the synchrotron radiation source there. But early on, stimulated by this mention of scientific equipment, I was reminded of some work we did at the UK synchrotron, and I put a link to a publication involving a collaboration with Morocco and ourselves with respect to telepresence and remote access as an alternative before something like the African synchrotron is established. And then, of course, from there, you move into this part of the pipeline, which is deciding to publish and making the articles linked with their data available, and the infrastructures that we've seen emphasized in the discussion then, of course, come to the fore. So anyway, that was a sort of an extra. That's very good, because
the
equipment.
More time discussing right now on some of these digital platforms, but definitely the equipment and physical infrastructures are definitely part of the recommendation as well, and we'll have to have a look at that also during the work of the working
an
group.
important point from Ross Mounts here, that of course research doesn't necessarily start from a funding proposal, which of course is absolutely correct, and absolutely.
Good, excellent. David, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. I wanted to provide a little bit of data relevant to the discussion about government funding and community crowdsourcing of infrastructures. And I wondered if I might show 3 slides.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
So I want to do this in the context of Open Citations, which is a small infrastructure organization making openly available bibliographic citations. And these citations are central to academia. Not only do they provide a means of assigning credit to other researchers, but when aggregated together, they provide the raw data for bibliometrics and scientometrics, and also for evaluating academic merit and research performance. And so it's vital for science that these data are open. We at Open Citations make it our mission to provide such open scholarly metadata. And our vision is to create a free and fit for purpose alternative to the subscription citation indexes for which academia pays so much at the moment, so that this will be routinely used by the global community as its primary source of citation data. And at present, we are providing access to 1.3 billion citations, which is approaching parity with the commercial citation indexes. Now, the point I want to make is this: we have been enormously helped by SCOS adoption. We were among the infrastructures adopted by SCOS for its second round recommendations. And without that income that come from those organizations that have taken up the SCOS invitation and funded Open Citations, we couldn't do what we're doing at the moment. But of our requested SCOS budget, the total income we have by crowdsourcing from our stakeholders amounts to only about 1/3, as you can see from this slide. And almost half of that contribution has come from one single source, the French National Fund for Open Science, without which we would be sure.
We can't see your slides.
You cannot see them?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I cannot understand why, because I switched on screen sharing. Let me, let me do one more thing then.
If it doesn't, for some reason, work, we can.
Here we go. No, maybe we do it again.
Because we can share them in the chat also.
I should have practiced this.
No, it's
beforehand. Let me just tell you the figures then.
And you can just share the slides with us. We will share it with the group for sure.
Yes. So the point is this, that community crowdsourcing is a wonderful idea, but at least for us at Open Citations, it is not yet working properly. In other words, it's only funding about 1/3 of our total requirements. And of that, about half has come from one single source, which is the French government. So this highlights 2 things: the importance of governmental funding for open infrastructures and the limitations of community crowdsourcing from organizations like national libraries and other well-meaning but underfunded groups that would like to give more but don't have the ability. So that's basically what I want to share with you. Thank you.
I agree. That's a very good point. And indeed, the crowdsourcing is part of the recommendation. And in general, this more alternative, innovative, open ways of funding is something that would need particular attention as well. And I was hoping we would have some of our colleagues from citizen science groups, because they also wanted to contribute to the work of the working group. If they're not here, they will during the work of the group, particularly looking into some of these issues of crowdfunding and crowdsourcing for infrastructures, including for infrastructures that allow for community engagement in different projects. Thanks for being with us. Please go ahead. We can't hear you. Just need to unmute.
Who are you speaking to?
Tim Hirsch.
Oh, right. Sorry, I didn't hear you name me. Thank you very much, Anna. So yes, and thank you very much for the opportunity. This has been a really great discussion. So I work for GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, and we're a data for research infrastructure that works to provide and facilitate free and open access to biodiversity data, which it basically means bringing together large volumes of data focused particularly on evidence about where species have occurred and have been found, observed, and collected around the world. And what that involves essentially is to develop agreements and mechanisms around use of common standards and sharing through open licenses, so that we can bring together data from a wide variety of sources, which includes natural history collections, observation networks, including, incidentally, many citizen science networks, as well as research data, and increasingly data coming out of sequencing of the environment, so-called eDNA. So I guess a couple of points I'd like to make and to talk about some of the reflections that I think we've heard over the last couple of hours. Is, first of all, on the question of sustainability and funding. We've been around since 2001. So in that sense, I guess looking at the issue about the problem of longevity of many infrastructures, that makes us feel sort of quite good in a way. And the model that we have as an infrastructure is we are an intergovernmental collaboration. So we're essentially a voluntary agreement among governments. And our funding model is based on an equitable sharing of contributions amongst our participating governments based on a multiplier of GDP. In other words, all of our participating countries who have equal say in the governance of the organization pay in proportion to the size of the economy, with a discount for developing countries. Now, it has provided us with a core income, which has enabled us to be sustained as an infrastructure over that period. However, of course, that comes with challenges and limitations. The challenge is that, of course, being a voluntary agreement among governments, we constantly need to make the case as to why there is a strong value proposition for open data. And there's always a little bit of a dilemma there, because our mission is to be as open as possible. Therefore, we can't be exclusive in terms of access to the data based on governments that are paying. So that's a sort of something that needs to be squared. We need to be able to, if you like, sell the importance and promote the importance of having that data openly accessible to everyone as a global public good that then requires some equitable division of responsibility in terms of the finance, and to somehow get around the free riding problem that all global commons confront. So I think that's, I guess, one of my main points is, I think as we collaborate and bring together initiatives in the open science sector, I think finding the ways of really living up to open science principles in terms of the needs and the requirements that implies for investment in the common knowledge pool that comes, for example, with open data, is critically important, and where we can really, I think, benefit from the open science principles. And just one more thing, because I know I've taken up a lot of time, is I think, just going back to Thomas's point, I think it's really important as well that when we talk about infrastructure, we're talking, yes, about technical infrastructure, but also critically about human infrastructure. And it's certainly in the way that we see ourselves as a network and a global data infrastructure, it's equally important that we're investing in training, in capacity building, in means of collaboration, and enabling use of the tools and the standards across the world. It's critical, not just in terms of equity, but in terms of the usefulness of the infrastructure. Because if we have an infrastructure that is only bringing in data from the global north, that's simply not fulfilling the purposes of a science infrastructure, which needs to focus on where the biodiversity is. So there's just, I guess, a few points that I hope are relevant to our collaboration as we go forward. So thank you very much.
No, it's very good. And also, we do have this working group on capacity building, and one of the things that they are doing right now is really to try to map up some of the existing initiatives and training materials, training tools that already exist across the different, again, part of open science, including for open infrastructure. So of course, at a certain point, the different working groups will come together, but it would be important for us, if you are aware of some good already existing tools that exist for capacity building, training materials, for open infrastructures, for open data, etc., please do share it with us, because we've also realized that there is a lot of excellent material out there, but it's just not being communicated widely enough for different communities to have access to it. So this is something that we really want to work on, and we need your help also to help us map these different resources that then we would like to share with the different audiences, because 90% of those resources are actually in open access and open educational resources, so could be used very, very nicely with our audiences. I had another person, Lucas. Would you like to still say something? I had your hand up.
Yes. Hello, everyone. One of the people from the Citizen Science Corner. Even we do not call ourselves Citizen Science, we are Civic Tech. And with our air quality sensor network, we have over 14,000 citizens mobilized to invest in the stations, build them, and set them up in 70 different countries. Everything measured, we provide this open data. The source code is open source, and we build it up on privacy. But we didn't ever receive any kind of support or funding. That's still a dream. We exist in 6 years, and we do not ask for it, because when we mention the numbers you would need, no institution takes us seriously, because they are used to deal with millions. And if you are not Microsoft, if you are not asked for 1 or 10 million, they think it doesn't work. But our approach is like widely used. And for example, RIVM in the Netherlands, the Health and Environmental Ministry fully integrated the data set of the citizen-generated data to fusion it, to merge it together with the official stations, and is working with the historical data of more than 18 billion data points. And using our working API, is visualizing the data to the citizen, is recommending to join the project. And also is like, working towards like machine learning approaches, analytic tools, and doing it all in open source and open data format. So to really like integrate it into all other activities. And we see it more as an approach, because we have proven it that what we have done with air quality, first, technology is not an excuse anymore. We have proven it works. We are hundreds of engineers collectively working together to make it work. Secondly, we have proven that you can scale it up. We are active all over Europe mostly, but our stations are in 70 countries. Step-by-step guides are available in 24 languages. And all of this is done only through 6 years of community work. And now we see that what RIVM has done in the Netherlands on a national scale is being applied by other institutions on regions and also national scales. But we ask, for example, the European Commission, would it be not right a moment to give this whole an umbrella to organize all 80 air quality institutions to collectively work together and contribute to one, as everything is open source and open data. And then there is silence, right? So who's gonna listen to a regular citizen? So we need a speaker, right? We need someone that equalizes, like makes our voices and approaches heard. And we have all the examples. We are not talking here about concepts. It's all done on scale and integrated. And it is just the missing point is we are asking for collaboration, right? Coordination. And we do not know where this is taking place. So we hope to contribute. And also, like we show that this approach, we also have a second network for noise. You can transfer this to soil moisture, UV, like light sources, radioactivity. These are all not concepts. We all support such other communities, right? Because on our level, community to community, we are all under attack of the institutions because they are not so tech savvy, and with their approaches which burn millions, it's like more against the little approaches. So they needed like hosting entity and also like support systems, and we all rely on each other. So just keep in mind that there is like a different layer, community to community, that exists out there. There is connecting hundreds of thousands and millions of people that are really like into contributing, but just like what is missing is the missing connection, right? So we are there.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, because we really, I mean, the recommendation is very clear on the importance of citizen science, on the importance of these types of networks. But I think there's a huge work that we need to be collectively doing in raising awareness of what it means, making sure that people understand that that does not mean diminishing the quality of the data that is collected. There is a lot of misconceptions around these approaches, and I think that's an important work to be done in the future. And we are actually, we will be issuing a bigger brief for policymakers on engagement of society, and some of these examples will be there. So we'll invite you to be part of that group who will be working on that, because it's absolutely critical. And it's true, it's still an underrepresented part of open science, so to say, and we have to make it a little bit more visible for the future. So thanks so much for that. I have two more hands up. Ana Maria Seto, please, the floor is yours. Great to hear from you from Latin America's perspective.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, thank you very much. And indeed, I was seeing that nobody from Latin America has taken the floor, the mic. So just a couple of minutes, because I see we are running out of time. First, well, I think this has been an excellent session, but as you said, there is a lot of material, and not just of material, of initiatives out there, and we don't know them all. And this, what we have heard today is just a sample, a very good sample. But one of the objectives that you stated at the beginning was to have an index of open science infrastructures, and that is, I think, urgent. And we all need to contribute to it because there is a lot of effort already being invested there. And I don't mean financial, because it's true that not all of us have the financial capacity, but we all have something to share. And that is important if we want this to be truly international and not exclude anybody. And in this regard, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. First, regarding the funding, as we have heard from the various speakers at the beginning, there are funding initiatives, but it is important to bear in mind, and that has been our experience, external funding is not sustainable. And so that means that we really need the buy-in of the governments and the institutional buy-in, because whatever initiative they want to pursue, they also have to consider from the very beginning, how are they going to sustain it? Even if it is a small initiative, in this regard, distributed solutions are a very important solution, and I appreciate that Thomas has stressed this. We have to think contextually and in a distributed way. And I think that has been one of the reasons for the success of the various Latin American initiatives, that they are self-supporting. Of course, we face the challenge of long-term preservation, but if we don't take the responsibility, and Thomas has said there is a responsibility for each one of us, then we become dependent on external solutions, and that is not sustainable. But yes, there's a lot to be known that is already out there. So this index, this mapping is, I think, an essential step to go further. And we would be happy to contribute to the mapping. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ana Maria. Of course, I mean, today in 2 hours, the idea was not to have a comprehensive overview of everything that is existing, but it's a start. And just to say, yes, the index, we have to see how to proceed. Knowing also that many organizations and initiatives have already done it. So it's a question just of pulling things together, putting them together. I saw in the slides that we're presenting here at the European North American level already the mapping being done. We have the same for Africa. We will work with you for Latin America. I am sure that there is a mapping that was done already there. You just have to kind of pull them all together and make them available in the coming months, and hopefully this group will help in pulling this together. I had also another hand, Vanessa, I think. Was it Vanessa?
Yes.
Who was?
Yes.
Yes. Please go ahead, Vanessa. Vanessa Pradman, go ahead.
So I just wanted to echo what Ana Maria was saying, how important that overview is of the offering and what we mean with infrastructure, particularly when you're talking to governments. So also what David was saying, I think governments are not aware of the rich offering and the need to fund open infrastructure. And so to make things more tangible, we really need to have that really broad catalogue. I know there is some content out there, but it's actually very dispersed and could be much better organised. And also the data that funders need is different to what other infrastructures might need and what. So I think it would be a wonderful thing if the UN could coordinate such a thing. And I also think you're very well positioned to raise awareness of the need to fund open science infrastructure. I was on a call talking about this topic, I think about a week or so ago, and somebody, I don't think it was a joke, it was a little bit flippant. They said, what we need a UN fund for open infrastructure. That was really mentioned. And of course, I mean, we've been thinking about different funding models, and I know that's like a huge feat, but how could we, and certainly the UN and yourselves could be in a better position to talk to member states, to raise awareness of the need for this, to show them about, you know, show them this offering and to think with them, is there a way that we could help fund infrastructure which is of global significance going forward, and how can we make sure that this remains a public good? I mean, you are in a brilliant position for that, and I would love to help think with you how we could do that. So thank you very much for also setting up this working group and to continue this conversation. I'm sure we're only at the beginning of it. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. And it's a very good introduction to kind of the next steps, also for the working group. I don't see any more hands here, and I know that we are kind of running out of time. So maybe I will just share some last points with you with regards to the next steps. So our initial idea was to work on this checklist or guide for open science infrastructures in line with the UNESCO Recommendation on Open Science, and the other one, the Index of Open Science Infrastructures. From the discussions, the index is obviously something that is needed, and we have to see how to do it. What would be interesting for us is if by the 15th of September, earlier if you can, share with us on openscience@unesco.org inputs for this index. Where can we find information about it? What do we pull together? What should we be looking at to propose to you some kind of first draft, possibly around November, of what that index would look like. And of course, we would be coming back to you either individually or in groups to help us even with this first draft. And then the group would meet together again, sometimes in November, to have a look at that index and where we have arrived at that point. For the checklist and the guide for open science infrastructures, the idea was really, as I said, there is a lot of very good information about what these infrastructures are, what are the key criteria they should have, what is the capacity building that goes with it. It's actually in the recommendation. So we'll try to pull that out, share that with you, see if this is something that would be useful. And if not, how we can enrich it or how we can actually make it more useful. There is obviously need also for some kind of tool or communication around investment, really investment in open science infrastructures, connected to the sustainability of those infrastructures. So maybe we can just collectively think and we can propose you something around those lines, and maybe working with some of you who have looked really into investment criteria and principles, and see how we can present that to our member states as well in a package around open science infrastructures. What I think is going to be very important also for the next stages is to kind of regionalize a little bit these discussions. So at this stage, we are kind of at the international level, and the open working groups are open. So the members are free to join. But in a second step, we will also have to set up some kind of regional hubs, maybe, to really have a better view of what regional perspectives are on these issues, to be able to then have both an international overriding principles for these issues and indexes, but then also something more regional with the help of our regional offices as well. If there is anybody who has any comments on this, I'd be happy to take them now. And if people are happy with this as next steps, then let's give ourselves the 15th of September for inputs. We will be sharing with you the summary of this meeting, the recordings, and all the presentations. Remind you about the specific inputs that we would be expecting from you, and then we will definitely get back to you after the summer to see where we are going. The next, just before I close and give the floor back to Ezra to close, the next working group also, just to connect these different working groups, is going to be on the 15th of September on open science monitoring framework. It's an important also discussion that we have to have, because the member states have to report back to UNESCO every 4 years, and we will need to propose to them a monitoring framework for them to be able to report back, that they can, but do not have to use. But this conversation on open science monitoring framework will be an important one. So we would be happy to have your inputs into that working group as well. So I think at this stage, I don't see any more hands. This is, of course, our website contact. We are all here to respond, and the QR code. There is just one hand, Jessie, if you would like to say something, Jessie Oliver.
Yeah, hello. Sorry, I don't have a camera today, but I just wondered if you could, when you send us materials, send them to us in a way that letting us know what we're allowed to share from this group, and if we can share a little bit of context enough so that we can send stuff to, say, the broader citizen science community for their input, in my case, for the various calls to action. Just letting us know explicitly, can we share these things or not?
Sure, Jessie. In general, the rule is you can share. We are a very open.
Okay, great. Just checking.
So no problem at all. Feel free to disseminate, to share. Everything will be posted online as well, so accessible for everybody. We really are looking forward to getting as much input as possible, and in a way that is as transparent as possible as well. Good. So if there are no more inputs at this stage, maybe Ezra, I'll give the floor back to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Anna, and thanks to everyone for that very, very interesting discussion. Apologies, we have run over a few minutes, but I hope everyone found it worthwhile nevertheless. So there, as was presented, a huge amount of information, ideas, and guidance and direction already for our forthcoming discussions. So let me just once again thank our panelists, everyone who presented following that in the discussions, and of course everyone who participated and joined in the discussion. And as Anna said, this is only the first step for this working group, so we very much look forward to our continued discussions with you and continued sharing of information, and we look forward to that. So again, as Anna said, the links, the slides, recording, and so on will all be shared with you. So don't worry about that. Everything will come. And I'm going to be very quick and end it there and just say thanks so much, everyone. And we very much appreciate your time. And we'll see you soon. Thank you very much. The meeting is closed. Thank you.
Thank you. And many thanks to Fereshte and Tiffany in the back, who were organizing everything, making sure that everything is running very smoothly also. So thank you for the two of them also.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.